All right, there we go.
Good.
So, Henrique, would you like to give us the the go trumpet, and then we'll get started? Wonderful, thank you. So if anyone has any questions as to exactly what's going on, you can ask Henrique after her talk. So just a few little logistic things for me. Charlie, are you happy to stop sharing your screen so I can put it in speaker view, and then the recording will be a bit easier to see? Perfect. Everyone who, when you're not speaking, please try and mute yourself so that there's just no interference or anything on the system, and it's easy for everyone to hear. What might be a nice starting point before I actually say anything is last time we did this, we did a group photo. Obviously, we can't do that in person this time, but if people are happy to turn on their cameras just for a second, it would be great if we can grab a picture of lots of smiling faces that we can put on Twitter. Perfect, thank you. And if you don't follow the Hall on Twitter, you're welcome, or Instagram, I think that's what people use these days. You're welcome to follow us on Twitter as well. Perfect, okay. You're welcome to keep your cameras on if you want to sort of let people see your expressions, whether you're happy, sad, very confused about what's going on. If not, of course, you're more than welcome to turn them off. So just in terms of who we are and what we're doing today. So first of all, massive thank you to all of you for coming along, but also to all of the people who've helped make today work. So Richard and Henrique from the fellows who'll be talking, and also Charlie and Sarah, so fellow PhD students here at Oxford who've helped put together the schedule, which has been really great. So the idea is that we want more people to apply. You know, Oxford has got some wonderful opportunities, but what we've been trying to do is increase the access to Oxford to people who might, you know, either not think about applying to Oxford or aren't sure that it's for them. So the idea of today's session is to have a really open and honest chat about how we found Oxford, and then from the fellows' perspective, how they see things like admissions to Oxford for a PhD program working. So just in terms of background, I think you are all, or almost all, scientists of some sort and home students. So this session is very much going to be focused around sciences and PhD funding provided by the UK government. You know, if you have friends or anything, you're welcome to show them these slides, but international students or looking at self-funding, we're hoping to have a different session just because there's some very different things that you need to think about there. Obviously, just to be absolutely clear, we're just PhD students, only a few years older than yourselves. We don't have all the answers. We'll probably say some stuff which you might wonder about, you know, how does that work? You're more than welcome to ask if anything's not clear. But the main thing is hopefully you'll learn a little bit about life at Oxford, life at Teddy Hall, and think about whether it's something that you might like to do. So I'm now going to hand over to Charlie, and Charlie is going to run through a few of the logistics for this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Ben. Everyone hear me okay still? Yes, we're good? You can hear me? Yeah. Yeah, so just a quick thing to say about the mock interview workshops we're having later. So I've sent you an email. You may receive this email, which has a PDF document with the agenda and then just some information about choosing the workshop. If you haven't received that email, there's a link to that PDF in the chat here. So check that out, and then please, yeah, fill in that short questionnaire as quickly as you can, and that will help us organize this. Then there are a few of you who have subjects that don't really fit the workshops. To those people, I say choose the one that seems the most appropriate. There'll still be some generic points that that should be still applicable, and there's also the possibility that we can arrange something like this at a later date, because we do have kind of volunteers that couldn't make today that could help with your subject. So yeah, cool. Okay, so that's all from me, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Henrique Lannemann, who's a tutor at Teddy Hall in medieval German literature. Yes, and I'll leave it to her to talk about graduate life and study at Oxford.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Ben, for inviting me along, because I'm relatively, in Oxford terms, new to Oxford, but very much in favor of applying here, since it's my 13th university in life, and looking back to what I've seen of graduate studies and my own experience of doing a doctorate, I think the Oxford system combines some of the best features I've seen in German academia and in British academia in other places. So I did my own doctorate in Göttingen University in something that was fairly newly set up as a graduate school that would bring together interdisciplinarity across, in my case, the humanities. But that was something that was fairly new and hasn't been that much continued in Germany, but is very much at the forefront in Oxford. So the opportunity to be part of a larger graduate community outside your own direct area of interest, while at the same time studying very specialized. So I think in my case, the trumpet I blew has the banner of Oxford Medieval Studies, and that is a case in point. So Medieval Studies in Oxford has 150 permanent members of staff, and they range from specialty in Arab coins to medieval languages from French via Latin to German, up to linguistic studies, to scientific dating of manuscripts, and include also the large group of resources in the libraries. And this wide range of opportunities, from the well-resourced libraries, or in your case, it will probably be more the labs, but to applying this knowledge across different disciplines is, I think, a really distinguishing feature of Oxford. And to combine that with a clear home in a college is something, when I was studying in Germany, I always thought I would end my life going into a convent, because I was missing the community in academia. And Oxford allows you to have this kind of meeting of minds in the home of a college. And so to have for graduate life that otherwise can feel quite isolated, this community of like-minded people, as you can see from the example of Ben and Charlie, who have set it up so beautiful, and Ben has experience also from running a part of the Middlecam room. So the community of graduate students is something special. In terms of what to look out for when coming to Oxford, I would say really try to link your sense of academic curiosity to a wider interest. It's your opportunity to combine high-level research with things like acting, singing, doing sports, and at the same time communicating in this with a group of other students. I think I promised I would keep it very short, just as an initial input, mainly to give you the chance to ask me questions about what it is to be a graduate student in Oxford. But I think Richard Wilden, as the one responsible in our college for all the graduate students might want to add a little bit to this.
Yes, Enrique, I might just pause and, should we pause and let people ask questions first, and then I'll say a few words? Are there any questions? Deathly silence. All right, well, I'll carry on and add a few bits. So my name is Richard Wilden. I'm one of the engineering tutors at the college. I am also the college's tutor for graduates, which is a slightly funny role, and tells you a bit more actually about what's different in Oxford from other universities. So as Enrique said, we have this, well, you're aware we have this college system, and that plays quite a big, well, it can play quite a big role if you want it to in your life at Oxford, but both for undergraduates and for postgraduates. And the fact that we actually have people like me as tutor for graduates, and we have college advisors, of which Enrique is one of them, and we have background conversations with you about how things are going, how you're getting on, what are you going to apply for your next thing, are you going to apply for a job here, and you're going to come to this music recital, or you're going to come for dinner on Friday night. All of those type of things, that is the engagement you have with an Oxford college that is actually really different from anywhere else. I should have started by I started my life at Imperial College in London. I was there for 13 years in total. I've just clocked over my 13 years in Oxford. I had a year out in Cambridge in between. So I've been around sort of the southeast corner, not quite as extensively as Enrique's 13 universities. I've been around the southeast corner of the United Kingdom, at least, doing some of the sort of prominent science and engineering universities. And really, it is something that's quite different in Oxford, from, at least from the sort of, I'm not sort of going to diss Imperial, but I mean, at least from the sort of the non-collegiate based universities, that you have this extra bit of life if you want to engage with it in the colleges. I thought some of the other things worth talking about, though, is actually just about graduate study in general. Presumably everyone on this call is at least, well, I presume the prerequisite is you're all thinking about it pretty hard, at least, to engage with this. And some of you will be a bit put off and a bit sort of petrified and a bit scared. You're doing an undergraduate degree, or maybe you're doing a master's course or something like that, and you go to lectures and you have classes, and it's all sort of, it's information fed towards you. And then you see at the other end of things, there's this researchy stuff that goes on, and you see, you know, Oxford University has been in the press quite a lot, always is, but quite a lot at the moment with, you know, medical research going around COVID. You think, well, that's sort of one end of things is where things, this cutting edge, world leading research gets done. And I'm a lowly undergraduate, and what's the space in between? And it looks scary, but the fundamental message I would put to you is actually the distance between where you are and being at the cutting edge is not big. There's about, I'm just trying to think, about I'm going to get my numbers wrong, I think it's 5,000 research students in Oxford. The largest part of the university's research is actually done through the postgraduate students, people like Ben and Charlie. And actually, you have the ability through graduate study to contribute to going from what you've learned in lessons, what you've learned in lectures, and then turning it into real physics, history, anything, absolutely anything in between, to making a real impact in advanced study. I say this to my new engineering doctoral students when they arrive, and it is true. I mean, different versions of this will be true in different subjects, but when you walk into your viva at the end of your PhD, and it is worth looking all the way into the future, your expectation and the hope is that you walk into that room and you are the expert in the room. Your examiners are just there as window dressing for a chat, to be honest. The best PhD vivas are the ones where the candidate at the end of it says, oh, can we carry on a bit longer? Because I'm really enjoying this. I'm having a really good chance to talk about my work. I mean, I've done 30 plus PhD vivas, and most of them end up, you know, in the pub afterwards for a good chat about the work, and everyone enjoys it. And that's the ambition. That's where you should be aiming for in any form of doctoral study. And it sounds really sort of, well, that's over the top and everything else, but actually it happens a lot, and that's what you should be aiming for. In terms of Oxford and you know, picking areas of studies and supervisors and that kind of thing, and why Oxford, a lot of you will have in the back of your mind, you studied something and actually there's something that really excites you moving forwards. It's a bit of, you want to do photovoltaic cells or something. So you go, right, well, I'm going to find the person to go and do that with. And a lot of you will be driven by the individual research groups and the supervisors, and that's what attracts you to go and do a particular thing. A lot of you will also be attracted by the CDTs and the doctoral training programs. These are really, I mean, they're prevalent across medical sciences and physical sciences, but Oxford's got quite a host of these actually, and we've got quite a few different doctoral training programs and CDTs represented across the college as well. But these are really great programs. You know, you come in, you do 6 months, 12 months of taught activity, really bringing you in from different walks of life to do different things. I interviewed somebody from Canada yesterday who's a physicist who's decided actually physics isn't for them. They're going to come and study how to design wind turbines with me. And they're going to go through our doctoral training program and show them all the bits about the different bits of wind turbines and how they work and how you bring those together to then contribute to move that forwards. So they're a nice little sort of, they're a really well thought out program to actually bring people from different areas to do different things. And then there's just the sort of, as Enrique said, it's just the eclectic mix of really good people around the place in Oxford. And it's not just in your discipline, multidisciplinary work is absolutely phenomenal. I work predominantly in the energy area, in renewable energy, and that is actually a whole mix between what you can do on the technical end, how we can, you know, design our wind turbine better, and what the guys on the economic side can do, what they can do about influencing policy and how you can sort of blend technology with policy and actually try and move things forwards. Because as our world gets more and more complicated and our problems get bigger and bigger, one thing that we have learned is actually that there is no silver bullet to anything. And actually it really is putting a lot of different intelligent academics, researchers together to actually formulate collective answers to society's problems.
Amen to that. I would I just put in the chat a link to the Oxford Research Centre for the Humanities, because they have put a lot of energy in the last 2 terms to taking programs online that would be accessible across the world, and most of what they call the big tent events addressing pressing questions from the pandemic, from thinking about what does isolation do to people, require really the collaboration between the sciences, social sciences, humanities. So I think the last half year has made it abundantly clear that you can't address something solely through lens, whether it be virology or psychology. You really have to put it together to answer these challenges today. So that's my bit of preaching over. Good. Questions? Just unmute yourself or write in the chat.
Sorry, I've got a question for Enrique. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sorry about that.
Fine.
So you talked about the community at Oxford and how sort of living around a college is really special. And since you come from an arts or sort of humanities background, how do you see yourself interacting with the scientists, and how's your sort of camaraderie with them?
So it's I'm going to dinner tonight in college, and I'll sit next to my colleagues who do something like Richard engineering, or I'm quite often dining together with Jeff Tseng, our physicist, and we decided to set up together a blog because he's very interested in medieval history and the development of sciences, and I'm very interested. He does particle physics to learn about his latest research trips to go to Switzerland and look at so it's a shared blog called Faith, Freedom, Physics, where we try to bring together a dialogue across the areas.
That's a fantastic example. Thank you.
Hello, hi, Charlie, am I you now?
Hi, Ronnie. Yes, good timing.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, sorry, yes, that's perfect timing. So any more questions we can save towards the end. We'll now move on to Ronnie Guthrie, who is doing a PhD at Teddy Hall as well in Earth Sciences. He's also president of the MCR, and he will be talking more about this. So yeah, over to you, Ronnie.
Okay, great. How do I share my screen? Right. Despite having Zoom for what now seems like an eternity, I've actually presented like a presentation like once because terms only just started. Right. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? Oops.
Yeah,
Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all well, despite the poor weather and the general COVID situation. So I'm here to talk about kind of what life is like in Teddy Hall MCR, what is the MCR, and just everything about it. I suppose the more fun social side of things. And of course, this will probably seem a bit possibly nostalgic and a bit of a blast from past because, you know, we can't really do all these things at the minute. So fingers crossed that this time next year, we will be able to do these things, or even later on this year as well. So as Charlie said, I'm Ronnie. I'm a final year Earth Sciences DPhil student. I would have handed in about 2 weeks ago, but of course, COVID has caused everyone's life to go upside down. So I'll be here for at least another 6 months or so. And I was the MCR president back in 2018 to 19, which was a lot of fun. And most of the photos you'll see are basically ones that I've kind of trawled through my Facebook and my friend's Facebook as well. So might not be the best quality, but there might be a few fun ones. So the MCR is both all graduate students, master's students, DPhil students, and also fourth year undergraduates. And it's also a physical space in Queen's Lane. But we're quite large now. There's about 370 students from around the world. There's quite I don't know the exact numbers, but there's quite a lot of DPhil students, and there's usually about 100 or so one-year masters, and then about 50 two-year masters, I think. So the rest made up of DPhil students, and also fourth-year undergraduates and medics as well, which comprise the MCR. So they refer to ourselves as community, but there's also the physical space of the MCR, and I tried to provide some good photos, but I thought the best way is to see if I can do. Can everyone see this 3D virtual MCR?
You might need to reshare using the new thing.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Zoom work. Right, here we go. You're sharing. Oops, no, back. You share. Share, right. You see this now? Yeah, right. So this is the MCR. You come into this little store. It's on the Queen's Lane site in the college site. It's rather nice and small and cozy. If everyone's read Harry Potter, it kind of reminds everyone of the Gryffindor common room because, you know, it's red and gold. It's warm. It's cozy. This was obviously taken in winter, so the blinds are closed, and it was also a couple of years ago. So it looks a little bit different, mostly just with the pictures on the walls. But you basically come in here. There's a little lovely kitchenette here. You know, tea, coffee. There's microwave, a small fridge. You can have some stuff. And then we come on through here, and this is the communal area. We've got lovely Sebastian here. So the MCR's mascot is this great big teddy bear. His name's Sebastian. He's frequently dressed up in MCR colors. And we use this space to hang out. We have parties here. we have parties here. Got this little map here, which kind of shows where there's little pinpoints here, which shows where all the students are from around the world. So when you come in here, you get to put a little bit of home up on here, and it's just generally a lovely warm place to hang out. You come here for coffee and to drink and to chill. The college bar is right next door as well, and it's we can go between the two. So yeah, so that's what the MCR actually looks like. Unfortunately, the fireplaces don't work anymore, but it's now where we keep, reading materials, books, newspapers. We get a variety of subscriptions to places, people like New Scientist, Times Higher Education Guide. We get the Times and the Guardian, I think, every day, so it's just a nice area. Right, let's see if I'll new share back to my PowerPoint. Right, so I've basically talked about what the physical MCR is. What do we actually do in pre-COVID times? Well, this is matriculation. So this is kind of when we first arrive. It's when you become a member of the university, and you all get dressed up in your sub-fusk, which is this gown and the little white bow tie, and you trek across to the Sheldonian, and someone says some words in Latin. You come back, and you're officially a member of the Oxford University. Hooray! And then we all drink prosecco. We have croissants. We have a great time. Henrika usually blows the medieval horn as well as we're walking there, which is always a nice sight to see and hear. And it's just a very Oxford experience. It's a nice way to enter university here. And the MCR, we put on a big party afterwards in the evening, but it's a nice day. It's very nice. And at the end of the year, we have another thing. So this is the handover of the MCR committee as well, and you can see we're all a bunch of happy chaps. You might have all heard about the sort of formal life we do. So every Tuesday and Friday, we have a lovely, you can sign up for it if you want to, like a 3-course meal in college, which is, sit down and get served food. We're relatively quite famous for our food. The food's really good, as you can see. The chef used to work in a Michelin-starred restaurant, and so it's really tasty, and it's not like being in some halls of residence where you're force-fed chips and some old chicken pie or something. It's really tasty. And we also share sherry beforehand in the MCR and pour it afterwards. And it's a great experience to kind of bring a friend or two to Oxford, show them what it's like, show your parents even, and just get a great feel of what Oxford is kind of like in a nice setting. We also do special dinners, such as Christmas dinner and the end of year Trinity dinners. They are particularly like hall highlights. It's when everyone gets together. Christmas dinner is particularly fun. Here's from a couple of years ago, and we get a great big tree up in the hall, and we all get dressed up. We have carols. We sing the Teddy Bear's Picnic and various other things. And of course, we also always stand up. We all stand up on our chairs and sing that as well. And it's great fun, and the fellows really enjoy it. We enjoy it, and it's the first major big event that kind of ends your first term here, and it's cracking. And then at the end of the year, we have another really big dinner, which is Trinity dinner in summer, and it's kind of a big last hurrah, farewell to all the friends you've met, or here's to pretty much everyone from 2 years ago, I think. And it's also a great night, and of course, there's a great big party afterwards. And yeah, it's really fun, and we always get dressed up. There's a chance to show off. I'm Scottish, so I'm always in my kilt, which makes me kind of a point of everyone pointing out, going, man in a skirt. But hey, it's still kind of fun. But we do other stuff apart from just eating and drinking. We're actually in relative privileged position where we actually own our own punt. Normally, you have to go down to Magdalen Bridge and pay £15 an hour or something per person to go and use a punt. We've actually got our own. It lives up by Lady and Margaret Hall, which is right next to the accommodation block for postgraduate students. And we get to go up and down the Cherwell there for free. You just sign up on the website, and it's great. It's called Mrs. Brown after the old College Butler, back in the days when Oxford used to employ things like staff to basically look after a small group of people. Mrs. Brown was the college butler, or the MCR's butler rather, and she did everything. She made the cups of tea and everything, and so we called the punt after her when she retired, back in 2003, I think, or 1997. It's one of those dates. But yeah, and it's a really nice punt as well. It's old wood, and it's really nice and heavy, and it's a classic. We also do things like exchanges with other colleges. So we have formal dinners with other colleges, so you can see what university colleges like, St. John's, and then they come to us as well. And we have that in a slightly different room rather than the big dining room. We have it in the old dining hall, which is slightly more grand. We also do swaps with our sister college in Cambridge. So in 2018, I think 2018-19, we went over to Cambridge and they came over to us, Fitzwilliam College. And that was nice as well, because there's always a lot of friendly rivalry between Oxford and Cambridge. And to be honest, there's not much in it, really. They're both pretty similar. But when you do go to see the other place, it does look a bit different. And the layout of the colleges is quite, I don't want to say strange compared to Oxford, but it's different, but in a nice, unique way. And it makes you both appreciate Oxford more and also be slightly envious as well. And I hope that goes both ways. We also do various parties, they're called BOPs. Various people try and say BOPs are acronym for a big old party, but I think it's just a word. We're lucky we have a graveyard behind in college by where the library is. It used to be the old church. And we still managed to hold at least 1 or 2 hours worth of our Halloween party in the graveyard for a bit, and that's great before it gets too cold. We also have the NSC garden party. I thought I had a photo up here of that, but that Norham St Edmund, the graduate block there in the gardens, which are lovely. We get a big bouncy castle. There's a barbecue. We have a variety of foods. We usually have live music, and that's every May. And that's really good fun. And we play croquet and things like that. And it's a relaxed affair. It's nothing. Whereas the other big parties are kind of end of year affairs. This is a chill out, relaxed one. You can bring some friends, hang out. It's nice, as long as the weather's good, which most of the time it is. And of course, college has got our own hall ball. It would have been last year, but COVID again. So hopefully it will still go ahead this year in 2021. And then after that, it's every 2 years. So fingers crossed it goes ahead, and again it's a great chance to get dressed up. And we're also one of the relatively more cheaper ones. You hear about other college balls costing several £100. Our one's about 80 quid, which, yes, it's still more relatively quite expensive. 80 quid's quite a lot to spend on one particular evening, but everything's included. College is closed off, there's treats, there's everything's free, there's lots of food, lots of drink, activities to do, and you get to see bits of college which are all nicely decorated, and it's a good thing to kind of go to. We are also kind of known as quite a sporty college. Now, I'll admit, when I applied here, I did not know that at all. In fact, at school, I was absolutely not sporty at all. So to find out that this college is known as quite a sporty one, then didn't really. When I was applying for my postgraduate, I had no idea about that. Didn't really care, to be honest. I only learned that once I arrived. I applied because I knew there's 1 or 2 researchers here who I admired and who I wanted to work with, and that's one of the reasons why I came. But we do have quite a big social sportal side. We're known for being famous for rugby, hockey, cricket, and football in particular. We quite often win the intercollegiate sort of competitions, cuppers with that. And we've done particularly well in rowing recently. The M1, the men's first team, they won double blades in 2019, particularly in summer rates, which is extremely difficult to do. So kudos for them. And again, I tried out rowing when I arrived here because everyone talks about it. I was absolutely rubbish at it, but actually for some people absolutely love it, having never given it a go before. And there's lots of different ways you can try out. And I would recommend you try it at least once, just to see what you think of it if you do come here. And the women's team also did very well. They won blades in 2018. And this goes for both men's and women's, and both our sports teams quite good. There's non-sporty things we do. There's a drama club, creative writing, croquet. There's journalism. You might have seen that we're on the University Challenge as well a year or 2 ago. Unfortunately, I don't think any postgraduates just got on the team. That it's all undergraduates, but you can still try out for it. And fingers crossed, we'll get back on it one year and hopefully win. Some nice cricket. Again, I think we've yeah, we've won cuppers 2 years ago, just missed out the year before that. So, but it's not all fun and games, eating and drinking, although that's always a nice side bit to it. You know, we take students from across the arts and sciences, DPhil's, masters, whatever, and we are able to order some more financial support for that for some academic reasons. Once you're here, there's specific prizes. There's like the Geddes Prize for journalism. You can be a Pontigny scholar. Each student is allowed £350 for the MCR college grants, and you can use that for traveling to things like conferences, for purchasing books, and for additional things that help your academic research here. We also run things like the academic seminar series, where there's MCR members present their research. That's every term. 2 or 3 MCR people present the research to the rest of the MCR. You can go along. There's free food. It's held in a lovely building in 17 Norm Gardens. That's 19, sorry, with Dr. David Priestland. He cooks up a lovely meal for everyone, and it's a nice informal way to kind of present your research without it being in too formal setting. And so if you just started some research, it's quite a good thing. Similarly, if you've just finished your research, it's a nice thing to kind of hone your skills. We also do a termly research blog as well, which is published on a website. I think it's still up there from last year. And you write something interesting that's interesting you usually do with your research, and there's a prize at the end of it. I think it's about £250 for the best one. It's judged by in college. We also do Access Hall areas, which is about every 2 years, where we present the college to the public. We can present your own research. The public can come in and see bits of college they wouldn't next see, like the college crypt, which is interesting, and it's quite small, but it's quite beautiful, and it's quite, you know, ethereal in its own way. And there's other things like the MCR Academic Anniversary Grant as well. So you can apply for that every single term. And that's also to supplement academic research, like traveling to conferences, things like that. So the MCR by itself is able to offer some additional funding. One of the reasons why Oxford is such a unique place is that we have the opportunity to help your research, and you can help yourself by kind of coming here. And it's the acquaintances you meet, the people you meet, how you interact with them, and how you can really put forward your own work and say, well, your work interests me. What do you think of my work? Is there something we could collaborate on this? Where do you see us going? How can we get some money for this? And you can meet some great people here, both academically and just socially. So that's sort of it about kind of what life is in the hall. There's probably things I've missed. This is the formal photo we have every year, or rather, this is the funny version of the formal photo we have every year. Just before Trinity dinner, we do a formal one. That's what you see in the MCR, all the photos. And this is the funny one at the end, which doesn't get put up on the wall, but we still have it. Any questions or anything?
Thanks very much, Ronnie. I see none in the chat, and in the interest of time, I think we'll move on. But if there are, we can answer them later. But yeah, great talk, Ronnie. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Cheers. So next we have Ben and Sarah, who are also doing PhDs at Teddy Hall, and they're going to talk about PhD life from their perspective.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which is always an interesting exercise. That did not work. Okay. Can you see that all right? Yes, no?
It's a black screen, but
it's a black screen. Okay,
yeah.
That's not what's intended. That did not work either.
Almost worked.
Almost. I feel like trying to share it whilst it's in presenter mode is always a challenge. Let's try this. No.
Are you on 2 screens, Ben?
I am. You know what? I'm just gonna.
Yeah,
I'm gonna unplug and move to one screen. Cool. Can you see that now? No?
Not quite.
If you're on one screen, just maybe stop sharing and reshare.
Yeah, let's try that again. Any better?
Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I am attempting to finish a PhD at the moment. Just going to move this somewhere so it's out of the way. And what Sarah and I are going to talk to you about is basically what is a PhD. So what does it actually involve, and hopefully help you to think about whether it's something that you're interested in doing. So if you have any questions, do either just jump in or we can go through them all at the end. Okay, so the first thing is that if you ask 10 people what a PhD is, you'll probably get 10 different answers. So the point of telling you that is that you have to kind of go into it with an open mind and not be entirely sure what you're going to get, which is both a bit scary, but also quite exciting, because it means that there are lots of different opportunities that you can come across, and there's a real chance for you to sort of share your own idea of what it should be like and shape the way that your research works and the way that your social life works as well.
Sorry to quickly interrupt, Ben. Could you make your Zoom a bit smaller because we can't see the title of the slide? So top left, I see a Zoom thing. Maybe.
Okay. This thing.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah, here. Oh.
Okay, I can't see anything there.
Okay. Okay.
You know what? We'll just do it out of presenter mode. There's no need to do that. Okay. So, is that better? Can you still see that?
Yeah, that's good. Sorry.
No worries.
We'll also share the slides for everyone after.
Cool. So the easiest thing is probably to cover what a PhD isn't. So it isn't just a continuation of your undergraduate degree, as Richard mentioned, depending on whether you've done a master's or not, depending on whether or not you do one of these doctoral training courses. So those are programs where you'll often get a master's degree in the first year and then do 3 years of PhD. You may have some taught content, but it's not just going to be 4 years of sitting in lectures and reading papers. There's actually stuff that you yourself will have to go out and do and make a novel contribution to. It's definitely not something where you'll be told what to do for 4 years. Some supervisors are much more hands-on than others, but in general, you're going to have to figure out how you want things to work. And again, that sounds quite scary. And I think Charlie and Sarah would probably agree it's something that most people probably get wrong, at least in the first year. But you will have sort of the opportunity, but also the requirement to figure out how you want your research to work. It's definitely not an easy way to get doctor in front of your name. If that's what you're thinking about, is probably not for you. Nor is it a good way to just try and put off if you don't making a decision about what you want to do with your life. If what you're looking for is sort of an easy time without having to think too much, then a PhD is almost certainly not for you. That doesn't mean you have to commit yourself to a career in academia if you decide to do a PhD or anything. But if you're going to make it through, if you're going to take that funding, then you should be sure that you're picking something that you have a good chance of being able to stick out for, between 3 and 5 years is probably a reasonable length of time for how long it will take people to finish up. So more seriously, what's the official definition of a PhD? Well, it's a research-focused qualification. So there's not really any way around this. You're going to have to make a reasonably substantive, but also original contribution to your field of research. So a general guide would say that, you should probably have a paper that's published or ready to be published or could be published by the time you finish your PhD. That's not to say everyone does, obviously, equipment can break and you might finish your PhD without having published a paper. Other people might have 3 or 4 papers published by the end of their PhD, but that's certainly very unusual. So it's the highest commonly awarded academic degree, and it's the most common doctoral degree that you'll see people getting. And it takes 3 or 4 years of sort of intense and focused study. Some people take a little bit longer. If you're doing it part-time, it might take you up to 8 years. But it culminates in you basically having to write a document which summarizes what you've found and what its interpretations and meanings are. And then, as Richard talked about, there's a viva at the end of it. So you'll work under the supervision of a number of academics, normally 2 at least. And then if you're in a lab, you'll often have a lab community around you. So there might be lab technicians, postdocs, other PhD students, so on and so forth. And when you get to your 3rd or 4th year of your PhD, you might be responsible for co-supervising a master's student or something, depending on the rules in your own department. So what's in a PhD, if you like? And again, this is a very difficult question to answer because every PhD will be different. It's not like an undergraduate degree where there'll be 250 people studying physics and you'll all learn the same things, at least for the first 3 or 4 years. So it's definitely a chance to do some original research. And as Richard said, you really will be the expert in your field. You know, by the time you get to your 4th year, like I am, it's more like you meet your supervisor to fill him or her in on what you've done rather than meeting them to ask for help, which is very much what it was in 1st year. So you will know more about your field than anyone else in the world. It might be a very narrow field, which is a very specialized area, but you really will be the expert. It's also a good opportunity to gain some transferable skills. So, you know, I think you really do need to be quite resilient to be able to do a PhD. It's not an easy ride, but it will also teach you things like time management, how to work in a team. You know, some of you will have experienced academia can often have some quite interesting personalities in it. So you'll have to learn to deal with conflict and disagreement in a professional setting. So these are all things that you'd learn probably in a grad scheme anyhow, but this is a chance to do it in an academic setting. But obviously, you know, the thing that people really are often motivated by is you get to work in a team with some really brilliant people and, at least in theory, advance the sum total of human knowledge on some particular field. So when you finish your PhD, it's worth just thinking about you will be seeing and doing and experimenting on things that no one else has ever done before, which is pretty cool. Even if it's a very small area of research that you're working on, it means that you can really have a chance to make that contribution, which can be quite challenging to make outside of academia at a very junior level. So it's a good chance to be really getting in there and getting stuck in, as Richard mentioned, whether that be with economics or policy or the actual science at a relatively junior level. So again, reasons not to do a PhD. So this is not to put you off, but if these are your motivations for doing a PhD, you should probably think about whether it really is the right role for you. So again, if you don't know what to do and you're just sort of trying to find something to fill the time and to put off making a decision, there are probably far easier ways to go about it. So you don't have to do a PhD straight out of your undergraduate degree. If you're unsure and you want to take some time to think about it, that's absolutely fine. But don't just do a PhD because you're not sure what to do, because you have to be willing to get up every morning for 3, 4, 5 years, go into the lab or the office and work on this. So it's got to be something which, at least at the start of your degree, you can get enthusiastic about. Again, you know, if you just want to hang out at university for another 4 years, probably not the greatest motivation for doing a PhD, because as Ronnie discussed, the social life of Oxford especially is really great. Certainly, I think it's a lot. I did my undergraduate at an Imperial. Oxford is a lot more social, a lot more outgoing, but it's not going to be 4 years of just easy fun hanging out and going to the pub every night. So that's not a good reason. Similarly, if you go into a PhD expecting that you'll become a professor, you need to probably be realistic that less than 10% of PhD students go on to become full professors. That's not to say that can't be your ambition and you're more than welcome to change it, but you shouldn't do a PhD in the expectation that it will automatically lead you to an academic career. And finally, a good reason to definitely avoid doing a PhD is because someone else told you you should. So that could be friends, it could be family, it could be a professor you worked with in the lab. If you want to do a PhD, it should be a decision that you proactively make. So imagine you're applying for a job. It should be something that you're actually wanting to go out and do, rather than something that you find yourself sort of falling into because you haven't got anything else that you can do and it seems like an easy option. On a more positive note, reasons to do a PhD. Well, of course, the topic has got to interest you, and you've got to want to make a contribution to it. People are motivated by different things. If you're working in, renewable energy, you might be motivated by making a difference to climate change and working on sustainable solutions for development. If you're interested in theoretical physics, that's probably not the motivator, but you might have another one that you have. So you should be clear on what your motivation is. And certainly, as Orlando will talk about later, when it comes to writing your research statement, you don't have to be the perfect candidate who's published 3 papers before their PhD, who has done 12 summer internships and is ready to, have the next groundbreaking discovery in theoretical chemistry. But if you can't demonstrate that you've got motivation for what you're doing, you're probably not going to get a place. Again, so it's important to choose both the institution and the supervisor, but just bear in mind that it's not always just about the brand name of the institution. You do need to have a supervisor who you can work with, and it's very much working with rather than working for, but you need to be able to work with this person for 3 or 4 years. So if there's no one in the department who does what you're interested in, and all you want is to go to Oxford, probably not the right decision to make. Similarly, if your supervisor or the person you're thinking about working with is someone you really don't see yourself getting on with, probably not a good idea to pursue that project. As I mentioned, you will get time. Again, you could get this in other ways, but you will have to manage your own research projects in your own time. So you will get those skills of sort of running your own life, if you like. But the long and the short of it is you do have to get up every morning and do this for 4 years. And that, I'll be honest, most PhD students probably lose a sense of wonder and enthusiasm and excitement after a year or two, and it doesn't come back until you actually start getting results. But if you just pick a project where you're not really sure whether it's something that you're going to want to stick with, if you feel like that now, you're probably not going to have improved on that feeling by the end of the first year of, late nights in the lab and so on. But in terms of advantages of doing a PhD, employability is one. So there, if you do want an academic career, if you want to go into scientific or engineering consulting or something, you can get a long way with having a PhD. It shows that not only have you done original research, but you've also had a chance to drive your own research projects to show, as I say, the resourcefulness and the resilience needed to make it through 4 years of study. So not only will you get some of the self-discipline and the transferable skills, but obviously the technical skills as well. Disadvantages, again, employability. So there are people who will leave a PhD and go do a grad scheme, which is obviously completely fine. But you may find some people think you're overqualified for certain jobs once you've got a PhD. Not that that's particularly common, but just bear in mind, if you've got a career plan in mind and it doesn't involve doing a job that requires a PhD, you don't need to stress about doing that. It won't necessarily make your life better. It's not a silver bullet for getting into the job of your dreams to have a PhD. It can be very stressful. I don't know any PhD students who haven't found it stressful at some point. It can be quite challenging, especially in the sciences, to find a good balance between work and life. For me personally, I've appreciated the flexibility. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I know that the equipment's always free and I can use it without being disturbed. But if you're looking for a job which you can really pigeonhole into 9 till 5, if you're doing lab work, that might not be possible. And of course, just a reminder, if you're doing a PhD, you're not doing something else. So if your heart is set on going to work for a hedge fund or something, you will be sort of a few years behind in the promotion scale compared to some of your peers. So you should also think about what you're missing out on by not doing a PhD. So if your dream is to own your own house by the time you're 30, a PhD stipend is not going to give you that. So just bear that in mind. So in summary, it can be, a PhD could be sort of the time of your life, as people often say about universities. It can also be a really hard, miserable slog, which you come out of wishing you'd never signed up to. For most people, it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think certainly for most people, they do make it to the end and they have really enjoyed it. But you should just be honest with yourself about the reasons for wanting to do a PhD. And I don't just mean, don't worry about whether you're good enough or not. The application process is to judge that, but only you can sort of identify whether you actually have the motivation that you're going to need to make it through 4 or 5 years of pretty intense study. That's all I have to say. Sarah, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that was most of the things. I would just say that I think sometimes people have this idea that a PhD is something that's really, really difficult, and you have to have had straight A's and be, you know, the smartest person ever and be willing to like give up your whole life to do one. But I think it's been highlighted as well, the most important thing for your success as a PhD student is going to be your personal qualities rather than how much you know when you first go into it or how good your grades were. It's all going to be about, you know, endurance and being able to ask for help and yeah, kind of sticking with it, and also yeah, keeping a bit of work-life balance and having something outside of your PhD so that you don't go crazy when you spend months on something that then doesn't work. That would be my main thing, that if you're unsure if it's something that you think you can do, think more about whether you have the personality for it rather than whether you have the skills and knowledge, because you're still students, you're there to learn. And I think the other thing is you don't have to go straight from your undergrad to a PhD. You know, there's lots of paths and lots of people work for years before doing one, do different things, and you can always come back to it at different time points, and that's not necessarily a disadvantage. It can actually be like an advantage. So yeah, should be my 2 pieces of advice.
Yeah, great points. Sorry, anything else to add, Ben, or should we?
No. I guess we can actually do questions later on if we just sort of keep to the schedule, which somehow we're actually managing at the moment.
Yeah, surprisingly, we're doing okay. Okay, so moving on. Next, we have Dr. Orlando Lazar, who is a tutor in politics at Teddy Hall and also Balliol. And yeah, he's been involved in interviews and seeing applications. So he's going to tell us about what he looks for in a good cover letter. So yeah, floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. And thanks everyone for organising this. It looks really good. Can I share my screen, Ben?
Yep, you should have permission to do that.
Okay, so here we go. Everyone see that? Yeah, lovely. Okay, so yeah, I'm Orlando. I'm a college lecturer in politics, and I got my PhD from Oxford in 2018, so not that far away. And when I was applying, I found it really hard to write a research statement. There's lots of guidance on university websites, but it's not helpful guidance. It's always really confusing. You don't ever have that much of a good idea of what they want from you. So me and a friend started a couple of years ago something we call the Postgrad Application Library. If you're lucky, you'll have a tutor or a friend that you can ask to see their kind of successful proposal, right? But often you can't. And so we thought we would have, it's just a Google Drive. It's a fancy Google Drive where people donate their successful anonymized postgrad applications for people to look at when they're applying themselves. So first of all, have a look, see if your topic or your subject's in there. And when you all get successful funded PhDs, please consider submitting your own. But this means that I've seen enough successful research proposals that I know what lots of them have in common, right? I don't think I'm going to tell you anything particularly thrilling or new, but it's worth being reminded of these things, right? Things that come up near the top of all of these research statements. So in sum, you want to show that your project hasn't been done, has to be done. If you can, you want to show that it has to be done now. You want to show that it has to be done by you, has to be done at the place you're applying, and can be done over the course of a PhD. So I suppose I should say now that this is really most relevant for people whose projects are projects, right? You're proposing a body of research that you intend to do over 3 or 4 years. I know for some scientists, you'll be working on other people's projects. It's more like applying for a job. I hope this will still be helpful, but there are lots of topics where you are doing essentially solo research with a supervisor. And that's what most of this is going to be about. So let's take these in turn. I can't tell you where any of this is going to come in your application. because they're all different, right? Some will want a big literature review, some will be extremely inflexible, they'll give you little sections to fill in. But whatever the format, somewhere near the top, you want to make clear that there's a literature gap, right? This is probably the main point. A short review of the literature, just a couple of sentences, and this can be in a cover letter, and then a but. There's a gap in the literature, and you're going to fill it. It can be quite hard to do this, right? It can feel like you're saying that everything that was done before you is kind of, they've all managed to miss this obvious thing, and it's fatally flawed in some way. But you need to do this, right? You need to show that your project's original, that you're filling a research gap. And you can't be too explicit. People read loads of applications, say, there is a gap in this literature that I intend to fill. Now, of course, lots of things haven't been researched. Only some of those things should be researched. So then you want to say why it's an important gap to fill. And this is where you talk about why you find this exciting, why you find this interesting, what you think filling this gap could do for your field, how you're contributing to this ongoing literature. And if you can, it's good to show why it has to be done now. This probably won't be relevant for lots of people, but if it's timely, or if it's topical, or if it's part of something that's just coming out, you know, like a new body of research that you could help shape, it's good to mention that here. Okay, so from that library of applications, here are a couple of examples of those kinds of sentences, right? They're quite quick, they're quite explicit. All of these have been preceded by a very short literature review. I'm talking like a sentence or two of the big names in your field. I'm sure I can get the organizer to send this round. You don't have to worry about reading it all now, but look at the wording here, right? It's very explicit. There's an absence, there's a gap, something's received little attention. And you're widening that gap and saying why you're going to fill it with your PhD work. Okay. Next, your project has to be done by you. There are loads of great projects. Why should it be you that does it? Why should it be you that gets funding? This is all fairly obvious, but it's good to be reminded of it. If you've done relevant research, mention it here, right? It could be that you've worked on similar topics in the past. It could be that your PhD project emerges from your MPhil or master's research. If it does, mention it. If it doesn't, that's fine. You'll still have relevant skills, right? So this could be formal training, which you should evidence, right? Say when you were trained in quant methods or archival methods or something. Or it could just be experience. You know, it could be less relevant, less softer skills, right? You've learned to organize your work on your own over the course of doing an independent bit of research, maybe your thesis, or maybe a master's thesis, something like that. Or you've learned to work as part of a team. Maybe you've worked in a lab, right? So this is all building the case for why you're the right person to do this research. And then the relevant knowledge of the material is a little more implicit. No one expects you to know everything when you start a PhD, but it's really good to let people know that you can hit the ground running, right? You may not have read everything, but you know what to read. You know where to go. You'll show this implicitly throughout your lit review. So you don't really need to flag it up explicitly. But these are the kind of personal qualities that you're trying to demonstrate in just the first page or two of your application. Okay. This one's very important, which is why your project has to be done here being wherever you're applying. So there are many more good projects than places on PhDs, and there are many more places on PhDs than funded places on PhDs, right? So often you'll be up against lots of great people doing great work, and who gets the money will come down to something like the degree of fit between your project and the institution. So this is really important, and probably the most important part of it is the supervisor. So in something like political theory, which is what I work in, you'll have one supervisor. But I know in other subjects you can have 2 or 3, you'll have a team. You need to make the case that wherever you're applying, they're the best person that you could possibly work with. And it definitely won't be true for all your applications, right? If you're going to apply to more than one institution, they can't both be the best person to work with. but just be very confident and explain why they are. And this could be their past work, this could be their current work. If you look on people's departmental websites, they often have students they've supervised in the past. So the kinds of projects they've worked on recently with students. That can be really interesting, can be important. Good to mention if they've supervised people in your position working on similar stuff. So choose your supervisors carefully and, say that they're the best person in the world. Do remember to check if they're on leave, either right now or if they're planning to be on leave throughout your PhD. They will often say this on their departmental website too. It's fine if they are on leave. That doesn't mean you can't choose them, but email them. Often they'll just be on research leave, so they'll still be accepting PhD students. Next, it's also important not to forget other academics in the department. Partly because it just shows more of a degree of fit, right? Are there other people there who are working on interesting, relevant stuff, even if it's not the thing you're working on? Are there departmental or wider seminars that you could contribute to or get a lot from? But as well as showing the degree of fit, these people make up your kind of backup supervisory committee, right? So say your supervisor does turn out to be on leave. It's a good point from the perspective of someone doing interviews or looking over applications if they think that they could just find somebody else quite easily. It means that you're less likely to have problems. There's always going to be someone who kind of knows what you're doing and who could step in to fill a slot on your supervisory team. So all of this involves trawling through departmental websites for hours, basically. And it's really boring. And university websites are terrible. But do it. Put in the work, because it shows that you've done your research too, right? And speaking of doing the research, the third point is training, doctoral training offered at the university. So I think almost every doctoral program now has quite extensive training in transferable skills, in methods, lots of kind of self-assessment courses. Some of these are going to be really useful when you're on your course. Some of them are not going to be useful at all, and they'll just be like jumping through hoops. But in your application, this is another way that you can demonstrate that fit between you and the course, right? You've taken the time to research what they do, what support they give students, and you're excited about it. You're excited to engage in a self-appraisal process, whatever they offer. Say it's great, say that you'd love to do it. And again, if nothing else, it just shows that you've taken the time to look into it, right? This isn't the same application you send to all the universities. Okay. And finally, of these points, and really important, you want to show that your project can be done over the length of a PhD, which is about 3 or 4 years. So they want you to be ambitious, and they want you to big yourself up and say that you're going to change the discipline, right? Really contribute to this wealth of human knowledge. That's all the stuff we've covered, but they also want you to finish. And funding bodies in particular are really wary about taking on projects that they don't think will finish in 3 or 4 years. This may be disciplinary, maybe it's different in some sciences. Yes, I mean, there'll be norms for your discipline. The way that you demonstrate that your project can be done will differ from application to application. But every application can show that you know it's manageable by breaking it into research questions and by breaking it into sections. So you can do this in a cover letter. It doesn't need to be long. And you can do it very explicitly too. I'm going to show you an example in a minute of someone who uses bullet points and numbered lists, just to show that their research kind of breaks down sensibly into different questions. Now, this just shows that they know what they're doing, right? They can line it up in front of them and it's not going to sprawl. Some research applications will ask for a timetable or a schedule of work. Now, this may be easier in more kind of formal or lab-based subjects, at least in political theory and the social sciences and the humanities, make it up. Nobody ever knows what they're going to be doing in term 2 of their 3rd year. Everybody makes it up. Don't feel bad about doing that. Make it look reasonable, sound confident, map out your years into terms and vacations, and put everything in. Your research for each chapter, the writing of each chapter, milestones on the course. I'll show you an example of one of those in a minute too. This is a very hard bit of the proposal to write because it's clearly nonsense. I mean, my plan changed dramatically between applying and the end of my first term. Everyone's does. That's fine. The thing about having a worked out schedule of work is that it shows that you can manage your time, right? It shows that you're not going to be a problem. You're going to hit the ground running, and you have an idea. Even if that idea changes, you have an idea of what your 3 years will look like. Okay, so this is an example of showing that your project's manageable in quite a short space of time, right? So it's just breaking it down to these questions. This is a political theory project. It's not my political theory project. And you can see this is numbered points with sub-points. I mean, it's not nice to look at, but again, about being explicit, about these people look at loads and loads of applications. If they see one broken down really helpfully, it immediately shows that you have a handle on it. You're not just saying, I want to go and look at politics for 3 years. You're saying, I know what my project is, I know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm not doing. Again, these will be sent round, so don't worry about not reading all of this, which is a fully worked out schedule of work. So this is from a historian. And you can see, he's broken it down into terms and vacations. He's said when he's going to write each chapter. He's put in these milestones like transfer of status in autumn of year 2. And he's even put in submitting his first paper to a conference, submitting his first paper to a journal, right? This shows that you know what a PhD is about. And if you do your research, you'll know what happens at the institution you're applying for. You'll know whether you need to transfer status, and you'll know roughly when that is. As I say, I don't know precisely the historian who did this. It was anonymously submitted. I do know that he's a liar. He didn't do any of this at the times he said he would, right? I guarantee you that. This is just about giving the impression that you kind of know what a PhD will look like and that you know how to organize your time, even though you know it'll change. Okay, so I'm going to finish with a couple of just procedural tips that didn't fit in anywhere else. Referees, you will need 2 or 3 or 4 referees for your application. And it's never too early to email them. So you always want to be the first or the second person to ask for a reference. You don't want to be the 10th person. It's much easier to turn down the 10th person. So as long as you know when-ish you're going to be applying and you know provisionally what your project's going to be about, you can always ask potential referees whether they would provisionally be up for writing you a reference. Once you've got that provisional approval, it's very hard for them to say no. You've got them, right? In aid of getting them, make life easy for them. So even if you're going to ask someone who taught you last year, or who you worked with for an extensive period of time, a couple of years ago maybe, they might not remember you in detail, right? It's quite hard. People have lots of students. Even if they really like you, they may not remember your work. So when you email, it's always a good idea to just remind them what you got in their module or on their course. Send them a couple of bits of work that you're proud of, that you did with them, and a draft of your proposal. And this will all just make it as easy as possible for them to say, yes, I'll write you a reference. And then if you can, find a backup. You don't have to. It's not going to be the end of the world if you can't. You already have to find quite a few referees. But it's a very silly reason to not be able to submit. So when I was applying, one of my referees got her dates wrong and was on top of a mountain on a climbing holiday with no internet at the deadline. So I had to scramble and find somebody else. And I did, just in time. But it's fine to just ask someone to be your backup, just provisionally. Just keep them updated, send them drafts of your project, and just say, listen, I've got 3 referees, but would you mind sort of just being available to write a 4th if I need you to? Again, not necessary, but good to have if you can. And then finally, a couple of tips about the writing process. So, as I said at the start, all applications are different, right? They're all different universities. And read them as early as you possibly can, because there will be something in there that's just nonsense. There will be two contradictory instructions. There'll be a form that doesn't make sense. And you want to have as much time as possible to email them, ask them questions, work out precisely what they're asking of you, especially for funding applications, and especially for funding partnership applications. So that's funding bodies that cover lots of different universities. Lots of funding's done like this nowadays. They may have sub-stages, right? So it may be the case that you need to submit something, and then a couple of months later, if you're approved, submit something else to a funding body. The earlier you know about this, the earlier your referees can know about this if they're needed. And the quicker you can get on with figuring out what you actually want to write. And then finally, this should be a collaborative process, right? Writing your research statement. It's really embarrassing to have to big yourself up and sell yourself and say that you're the one person capable of making this sort of contribution. It's much easier to have somebody else tell you that you're selling yourself short than it is to tell yourself that. So it's really, really useful to share applications with friends, with friendly tutors, with people who you know who've gone through the process. And it's also really useful to share them with non-experts, right? Your family, your parents, your siblings, people from other disciplines. Because especially for funding bodies, the people who read your applications are probably not going to be in your narrow specialism. They may be quite far away from you, academically speaking, right? You need to make sure that your proposal makes sense to them, and that your explanation of why your work's important makes sense to them too. So yeah, I mean, share it with as many people as you feel comfortable sharing it with, and read theirs too. I can't tell you how much it'll help. And for a virtual equivalent of that, look at the postgrad application library. As I said, I'll get them to send the link around. But yes, it's the next best thing to actually sharing it with people, but you should do both. Okay, I think that's it. So I think we have time for some questions now. Is that right?
Yes, thank you very much, Orlando. Yes, we do have time. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Orlando. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very useful. I was just wondering if your advice might vary based on part-time applications for PhDs at Oxford.
I'm sorry, was that it, or did you cut out there? I couldn't quite
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Hi, so I was just wondering if the advice you were giving of structuring out the kind of plan for doing the PhD might vary for part-time students, where it might be harder to kind of plan for 8 years ahead, say at the very maximum.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it will vary, right? Because as you say, it's 8 years ahead. The basic principle of saying when you reckon you'll be doing each stage, I think I'd say it would stay the same, right? I mean, it's unrealistic to know what you'll be doing in 7 years. It's fairly unrealistic to know what you'll be doing in 2 years or 3 years, right? This is really about showing that you know that you can have a plan and you can move through it. And so I wouldn't worry too much about it being part-time, changing that process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Anyone else? No? Okay. All right then, well, Ben or Charlie, or indeed any of the other organisers, can I send you this to send around, just because I'm aware there are some quite text-heavy slides there, the examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lovely.
We'll put that all together. And this is being recorded, so we can just share your video if you're happy with that, or we can just cut your bit out if you don't want that.
No, go ahead. Share away. All right. Great. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm afraid I have to run off.
No, perfect.
But if there are, I've got some more time. Okay, lovely. All right. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay, so we have 5 spare minutes. So what I might do now is quickly just talk about the mock interview. So I've looked at your responses, and most people seem to be happy with the groups. There was a few people where there was potentially a clash. I see like your preferred group. Anyone with a clash, could you say now, could you like ideally what the group would be in the chat maybe? And then the only other thing I saw, Sarah, who's doing neuroscience, I'd recommend you join group 3, which is, well, I'm doing neuroscience. So I think it'd be more suitable group there. Yes. And then we have in group 1, there's a few people that are keen to present, and that might take longer than the 45 minutes we've allocated. So we could maybe split that group up, or we could make the things longer. If anyone has any thoughts, volunteers or attendees, let me know.
I think we can just run with it and see what happens. You know, if people have got long presentations, maybe just try and cut them down a little bit, maybe in group 1.
I think maybe it would make sense otherwise to just split that group into 2, maybe into one group with people who want to present and one group with people who want to just have a discussion, because I think there's like 8 people in that group, and I think half want to present. So that's probably going to take a lot of the time, but I don't know. I don't mind too much.
Yeah, so maybe I'm thinking Guy could leave group 3 and then group 1 splits into 2, and it will have 2 people in each. So we have the 2 Sarahs, Guy and David. So I think we'll do this actually, because Guy's doing engineering, but it's well, it's more neuroimaging, I guess. Yeah, okay, so maybe we do this. Yeah, I would suggest this actually. Okay, so I will, over the break, I'll sort this out. So people in group 1, there'll be 2 groups. You'll be allocated to group 1A, group 1B. Yeah, so then everyone that wants to present their work will have that opportunity. Cool, okay. Don't see any questions, so I'm assuming that's all good with all of you. Cool, okay, well, we're a bit ahead of time, but we can move on. So finally we have Sally, who's just woken up in Florida, and she is going to talk about selling yourself and how to look for a PhD and these kind of thought processes. So
have we lost Sally?
Oh, I saw her, yeah.
She was here.
Hang on, let me check. Internet just froze apparently.
Cool, well, we can give her a second.
If this fails, I do have her slides, so
We've got a minute or 2 to play with anyway. So
I don't think it's going to take. Wait 5 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, so any general questions, please let us know.
No one has any questions at all, so presumably you all have your applications sorted, and we'll be seeing all 20 of you at Teddy Hall next year. Right, perfect. Job done.
Yeah, I guess, okay, Sally's here. Maybe quickly, one thing to...
Do we have to pick a college? What's the question say? Do you have to pick a college at the point of application? No, but most people do. So you can either apply to a specific college, or you can apply to just like you can have an open application and then they'll assign you a college. It depends what you want. If your heart is set on going to like an old fancy college like Christchurch, you'll have to put that down as your first preference. You won't get it out of the pool. If you don't put a preference down, you'll probably get given one of the newer colleges. So, you know, one of the grad only colleges like St. Cross or Linacre, just because they take more graduate students. I think it depends on the feel. Like if you've decided that what you want is to go somewhere that looks like Harry Potter, well, Teddy Hall's probably not for you. If you want somewhere that's full of drama, Christchurch is probably a great place to go. You know, you've kind of got to look at the reputation of the colleges, which are normally pretty well deserved, and what appeals to you. Like if it's really important to you to have great food, probably don't go to university college. Like you can find all this online. There's lots of guides that are mostly for undergraduates. Obviously those guides don't exist for the postgraduate only colleges, but I think the postgraduate only colleges are a bit more, they're a bit less sort of esoteric than some of the old fancier colleges. The other thing that's worth looking at is how many people they have that do what you do. You probably don't want to be the only person doing your subject there, and also how much funding and support they have available. So some colleges, Teddy Hall has a lot of scientists, which means there's lots of support for scientists in terms of scholarships. If your thing is doing, you know, education, there are other colleges like Kellogg which have much more of a focus on education.
Yeah, very good points. One other thing to add, you can check accommodation prices as well. This will vary, and also where the accommodation is. Maybe it's going to be closer to where your lab is, these kind of things. Although typically after your first year, you'll live out anyway in houses and things. Yeah, there is definitely a website, like a Oxford-based website, that goes through the colleges and reputations and pros, cons kind of thing. So I'll include this in the information I'll send you in a few days' time. But yeah, hopefully that answers things. Yeah, Nuffield Department of Clinical Neurosciences. I tell you what, I'll answer this question later. We'll get on with the talks, but yeah, this is a bit unclear, I think. It's not, I believe, it's not actually a college. It's
well, there's Nuffield College, and then there's the Department of Neurosciences, isn't there? Yes.
So there's neuroscience in Oxford is quite weird. It kind of like grew, you know, it's quite a new thing, and now suddenly they're trying to merge things. And Nuffield Department of Clinical Neuroscience is one of those things. But I've just joined that department, in fact, but I was in pharmacology before. But yeah, so there's departments, which is about disciplines, and then colleges, which is less to do with your actual work. You know, your PhD doesn't matter. You can do a PhD in this lab and be in any college, and it won't affect the PhD. So it's a bit of a separate thing. Okay, Sally, are you good to go?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my slides? Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for coming. I'm presentation with Charlie. I'm a second year DPhil in physics, and I'm coming to you from Florida, so it's pretty early here. But today I'm going to give a talk on kind of a three-part talk on mostly how to pick a research topic and how to pick a supervisor, and a little bit on how to write your research proposal, even though Orlando seemed to cover most of that. So we'll just go through it more specifically for STEM fields. All right, so away we go. So like, I don't know if I'm going to be repeating anything from earlier today, but hopefully maybe it'll just drive some points. So it's important to think about what you're interested in, but also what you're not interested in. what projects you're willing to do and which ones you're not willing to do. And when you're kind of like starting to look at projects, I like to have an honest inventory of my own strengths and skills, but also the same inventory of my weaknesses. Additionally, because the PhD is a place to learn and you're a student, the skills that you want to learn. So I have this exercise that in the slides, we won't do it here, but before looking at projects, like taking this honest inventory and sort of like a journal exercise where you sit down for 10-15 minutes and you write down these things so that you have sort of a picture of you as a candidate. So I didn't know anything about Oxford. I'm from like the panhandle of Florida, so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I didn't even know where to search for projects, but obviously, you know, you search the departmental website, but I didn't know that there was so many sub-departments, and I didn't know that the projects weren't going to be explicitly explicited like cross-field. For example, in the linguistics department in Oxford, you can also find some like artificial intelligence projects because the natural languaging processing uses a lot of AI. So kind of branching out and thinking, you know, your project, the project that you might want to do might be in a different department than, you know, you might originally think. As for the description of the project, it seems like when a supervisor writes the description of the project, there's kind of, it seems like two main kind of things going on. Either they have a very exacting description of the project, or it's sort of an amorphous description of their research. So I would encourage you to be a bit flexible, and the PhD sort of has like a life of its own. So you want to kind of let that project take it whatever form, whatever direction you're going to go in. I think Orlando talked about, you know, in the students' research proposal that, you know, what they did didn't exactly happen in their PhD. As for advertised versus non-advertised projects, if you're looking to work with a specific person, I would say contact them, which we'll talk about later in the talk. But all the advertised PhD projects are here at this website, and I had no idea about this website. So this is Charlie told me about this website, and I sort of looked through. And we'll share all these slides with you, so you'll have this link, so don't worry. After you've sort of like cast your net out and looked at all the projects and maybe became a little bit overwhelmed of, oh my gosh, I don't know what I want to do. At least that's how I felt a bit. It's time to refine your search. So looking back again at those strengths and weaknesses, your skills, and what you want to learn in the PhD, and then thinking about your overall goal of your PhD and what you want to do in your life. You want to like narrow it down. So, you know, what do you want to do in your 5-year plan, in your 10-year plan, in your 20-year plan? I mean, don't be afraid to really dream big, but also, you know, have that plan B, that plan C. What do you not want to do next? So I've sort of pigeonholed myself into that I'll probably be computer coding for the rest of my life, which is what I didn't really think that through. But it's okay because I've actually learned to really like it. And it's gotten quite interesting. But thinking about, you know, what are these skills you want to learn and where do you want to go next? So remember, the PhD, DPhil, is about learning. All right, so the human element, picking a supervisor. People do not tell you about this student-supervisor relationship. It's somewhere in between academic parent and boss. And so I've included this family tree. I went to Academic Family Tree and I found the family tree for Stephen Hawking. And this family tree provides you like you know, you can network with the students in your family tree sometimes pretty easily, sometimes not at all. But your supervisor can really make or break your PhD. So it's important to kind of think about what the supervisor is like and how to get on with them. So who you work with makes, I think, a huge difference. And I think it's important to think, you know, what priority to you is the human element, but also what priority is the human element to your supervisor. So you can have a really great PhD project, but if you have a not great supervisor, you know, it can really make your life not great. But again, being flexible and open, you need to be learning to work with different types of people. And I think a good way to find out about the supervisor is ask current or past students about their experience. Even if you can, visiting the lab, I guess now because it's, yeah, lockdown, coronavirus, all the things, you can probably go to some sort of social event for the lab, maybe, and see kind of what the social culture is like. But it's important to ask about in and out of the lab, what their work-life balance is like. So again, taking this honest inventory, you know, what do you think you will need from a supervisor? I'm traditionally a chemist in a physics field, so I need somebody who can help me bridge those gaps and who's going to give me that sort of perspective. Are they going to have time for you? Do you want to be more left alone? Do you want them to be more hands-on? Do you want to be meeting with them every week? Do you want to meet with them bi-weekly? Think about the size of the group. Are you their only student? If so, then you're going to get more attention. Do they have a medium-sized group, you know, 3 to 4 students? Do they have a big group where there's like 6, 7, 8, 9 PhD students? Also kind of getting in, maybe even in touch with the postdocs in the group. I know I work very closely with a postdoc in my group, and I meet with them every week, and I meet with my supervisor every other week. So yeah, that's a big part of the PhD, is picking the supervisor. But also, you know, what can you expect from a supervisor and from the PhD in general? I put in bold, you are a student. The PhD overall is a time for you to learn. It is not cheap labor, even if they want you to think that for them. So don't be afraid to ask for help from your supervisor, from other professors in your department, and from postdocs in the group. Don't be afraid to take time off. Fighting burnout is a big part of your PhD. But also when you're taking on this PhD, keep in mind that this is probably the only time you're going to have to do it. This is 3 to 4 years where, you know, you have to be pretty invested. So coming back to sort of setting an intention for your PhD, like you'll have to sometimes dig down deep and remember that intention so that you don't quit, because you'll want to, but just press on. So I've included this plot here of the Yerkes-Dodson law, which is about performance and level of stress. People perform optimally with a medium level of stress. People burn out after 10 to 14 days of high stress. So I think it's important to, yeah, keep this plot in mind. So take care of yourself. All right, so reaching out to potential supervisors. You can email them. If they don't have a PhD, you can ask them if they have one, if they're taking students. I would write them a thoughtful, or you can email them, obviously, if they're advertising a project. I would write them a thoughtful email to them, not a generic email. You want to read up on their background, maybe where they did their PhD, what their research is on, what their current research is on. But don't be offended if they don't email you back. Sometimes it might take a couple times, or sometimes they're never going to email you back. And some professors are going to email you back pretty quickly. So for me, I asked my current supervisor, I asked for background to read up for the interview. And what I didn't know about the Oxford interview is that I was going to be grilled scientifically. So I read a couple chapters of the textbook that my supervisor wrote, and I sort of took a look at the research that he's involved in, which is quite broad. If there is an opportunity to have a conversation with them, pursue that opportunity. Like, don't be nervous. It's going to be okay. Like, you're a student, they're not, they're a senior academic. Pursue that opportunity to have a chat with them. And it's not just them interviewing you, it's you also interviewing them. So we'll briefly go over this, since I think Orlando talked about this, writing a research proposal. So I'm going to give this from a STEM point of view. Obviously, reading those guidelines early. I like to also, I think it's important to read things early so that they sort of like marinate in your mind, so you can have some time to really think over and mull what you want to put in it. And also doing several drafts, getting it all out on the page, and then, giving it to friends and family, to maybe other academics that you're connected to, for like multiple drafts. That's a helpful process, I know, for me. As for tone, I would go for a more professional tone than a casual one. This is not a personal statement. This is a research proposal. I think UK students tend to be a bit shy and undersell themselves. So I'm really glad Orlando gave this talk about selling yourself. So you can be confident. You can, I want to do this. This is why I want to do it. This is, the skills I have. So I think of this sort of as an abstract for your proposed work. Charlie even said, you can think of it as you're writing a mini grant proposal. I don't know how many of you have exposure to writing a grant proposal. I had very little experience, but some. But I like to think of it like a structured abstract. You have context, aims, methods, results, conclusions. So the context, why did you choose the project and why is it useful? That can be maybe a little bit more casual, but I would still stay on the cautious side and stick with the professional tone. Aims, what do you want to accomplish? So again, thinking about that 3 to 4 year time period, as Orlando said, think of something that you can accomplish. You don't need to oversell. Think about honestly what you can accomplish in that 3 to 4 years. Because I will say they want to know that this is what you're going to get done. Methods, what skills do you have that will that you can accomplish this task? And also, what skills do you want to learn to accomplish this task? The PhD is an enriching experience. I've learned a lot in my PhD, and I really enjoy picking up new skills and learning new things. So yeah, kind of outlining that. And your results, like this is sort of like an extension of aims. Like, what will the proposed work contribute to the field? What will it contribute to maybe even the world? And then some sort of closing statement that can either summarize or sort of like push your proposal, sort of ending on that strong note. So if you want to contact me, I would love to help you. I'm really care about, diversity happening in Oxford. So I am a full-time DPhil student, so please keep that in mind. But if you want to write down my email, I can be a person that helps read your research proposal and give you feedback. But do it early, because yeah, do it early. So there's my email, and thanks so much for your attention, and I hope you found this helpful. And now we can take questions for about 10 minutes. So don't be shy.
Cheers, Sally. If we've got a little bit of time now, we could even do some of the questions in general now, rather than waiting to the end, and then we'll take a break before we do the interviews. But what we've done in the past that might be quite useful is basically people would ask questions, and then anyone who wanted to from the volunteers, so me, Sally, Charlie, Sarah, and I see you've got Trine as well, basically gets 15 seconds to answer. The fun of that being that then you get lots of different perspectives from everyone and no one just talks at you. So obviously not every speaker might be able to say something on the topic that you ask about, but if you do have any sorts of questions, now's probably the time to chuck them out. There's honestly no stupid questions here. Oxford is antiquated in the way that it works, so there are many things that make no sense and probably made a little bit of sense in like 1250, but in the last 800 years have sort of moved on. Okay, I'm going to try not timing people. Last time I actually got a stopwatch out. How would you recommend preparing for an Oxford panel interview? Okay, so speakers, if you want to unmute yourselves and then go for it. Charlie?
Okay, so I think the most important thing is knowing the lab. So
I think you've cut out a little bit, Charlie.
Okay, tell you what, someone take over and I'll join on my phone.
Cool.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll go. 15 seconds. Read your background, email that supervisor, and do the thing where you put your hands up in the bathroom stall to like center your own confidence, because you know you got this.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, I would say if you need to do a presentation or something like that, really practice it. If at all possible, talk to people in your field that have applied there before, because they can tell you what type of questions to expect.
From my perspective, what am I going to say in 15 seconds? Make sure you have the obvious questions rehearsed. Like, don't leave them wondering why you want to go to Oxford. Don't leave them wondering why the project is important in the grand scheme of things to fund. Like, you can't know what the interview is going to be like, but you can prepare some of the answers to the questions you're probably going to get. Okay, any other questions?
If you can hear me.
Oh yeah, go for it, Charlie.
Yeah. Know the lab and enthusiasm. I've heard this from supervisors, from people in labs.
Oh, you've really cut out again, I'm afraid. Do you want to type your answer in the chat? And then if anyone else has another question for a quick whip round of answers.
Yeah, my question was, how much input do supervisors have over the decision process? Like, is it, like, yeah, how does that work? Who has the input and everything?
So I'll go first on this one. It'll be up to the assessment panel, and there's some pretty strict rules to make sure there are no conflicts of interest in there. So if someone's your reference or been proposed to work with you and they're on the interview panel, they'll be limited in what they're able to say. I'm not sure in other departments, were you guys interviewed by your supervisor or the person who ended up being your supervisor? Yep, Charlie's nodding. Sarah's nodding as well.
Well, just at least in my department and from my supervisor, he doesn't get to pick the students, but definitely if he didn't want someone, like, you're not getting in. So if in the end, even if the panel liked you, if the supervisor doesn't like you, you're not getting that spot.
I would say that the supervisor's contribution is probably necessary but not sufficient, in that if they don't want to take you, regardless of how good you are, you won't get in.
Okay.
But even if they love you, that's not a guarantee that you'll get a place.
In my interview, my supervisor was in the room along with 2 other academics, and he somewhat led the questioning at the beginning of my interview to sort of set a nice tone for me, but that was only the first maybe 10 minutes. And then I was grilled by the other 2 academics for the remaining hour. My interview is quite long and extensive. So, but I think it did have to do, I think on my panel, each of them like had a 1/3, you know, say. So it was very much up to the panel.
And Charlie is now joined on phone. I think you messaged me privately, Charlie. I can read it out. He says, the person that really wants the PhD is the one who gets it. The key here is really to find the perfect PhD for you and to let your enthusiasm for the topic and learning skills shine in the interview. I think that's probably for the interview question rather than the supervisor question.
Yeah, sorry, I think I was delayed typing the question, yeah. The interview question, yeah, mine was, yeah, with my supervisor, members of his lab, and then someone else. So it was quite like a broadish, well, it was basically his lab. And essentially I had to present, I was given some data to analyze, because a lot of the PhD is analyzing the data rather than collecting it. I had to analyze the data and just show, you know, what kind of coding skills I had. And then there were questions that linked that kind of, you know, just skills to actually what does this mean, you know, in terms of how the brain's working, this kind of thing. So understanding the skills you have in a PhD and then what that means, and that kind of transition is another important thing to think about as well.
Okay, I saw Linda's just joined us. So Linda is also a PhD student and may want to chip in as well. Do you have any advice for applying to CDTs where you don't get to pick a specific supervisor or project when applying? So just for those who aren't aware, CDTs, DTPs, DTCs, they're a big group of programs where you'll do some courses in your first year, and you normally get 4 years of funding rather than 3.5 years of funding. Some of them you get a master's degree out, some of them you don't. So I don't know, I'm on one of them. Are any of the rest of you, Sarah? Yeah, any advice on how you manage that?
I think you really want to push that and, you know, explain why you're doing that kind of program and why that will benefit you, why you're not just going straight to a, you know, a 4-year PhD with a specific supervisor. I think if you come in and you tell them like, oh, I already know where I want to go and exactly what I want to do, they're going to wonder why you need that program. So I think, yeah, explaining why you want to do that kind of program is really useful, and maybe preparing for more general science questions or for getting questions about projects that you've done in the past.
Sarah or Charlie, are either of you on a CDT?
No.
No? Okay. If I'm the only other one, yeah, so what first Sarah said was completely right. Like, if they're going to pay you for 12 months of salary to do talk courses, there needs to be a reason why you're the right person for that, right? Because if a lot of those courses work on the principle that there aren't enough people trained in a particular field. So mine's the environmental research one. The point being that too many people come in to do a PhD without knowing enough advanced quantitative methods or coding or whatever. If you go into it saying, I'm an expert at all the things you're going to teach me, they're probably going to be like, okay, well, what's the point in us spending a year training you up? You might as well apply for funding directly. So definitely make contact with the supervisor anyway for the CDT, because somebody will need to like recommend your application probably, but make clear why you're attracted to the CDT program. And like, to be clear, if you don't like the idea of doing a year of talk courses, don't apply to a CDT. Like, there's no, it's not going to be just a year of sitting around doing nothing. If you don't want to do talk courses and training for a year, just don't apply. Okay, how high level or granular should your initial email to potential supervisor be about an advertised DPhil topic? Anyone want to jump in on that? Probably no right answer, but perspectives welcome.
So for me personally, because I apply to direct projects, like direct supervisors, the people I applied to, I had to rank them in terms of preference, and I think it's dependent on the department you apply to and the scholarship you're applying to. But I had to pick 3 out of the choice from the department, rank them, and then I was told by the department to actually email the supervisor directly and arrange an interview with each supervisor to make sure I made the right choice. So the email that I sent was very, very specific to each project. And during that kind of pre-interview, they actually grilled me quite heavily on the literature. So I think it really is dependent on the department. Yeah, that was my experience anyway.
I guess I'll weigh in on this. If you're going to interview, if you're going to email a supervisor, it's not that you have to impress them, but if you have knowledge of the subject, then go ahead and include it. But if you don't have knowledge of the subject, they are going to find out very quickly. So I would say give as much information as you can to not get yourself into trouble. I think it's good to be transparent in a sort of sell yourself light about what you know and what you don't know. So that's how I would answer that question.
Cool. Further questions welcome. All the things you thought were too stupid to ask a supervisor, you can ask us because we won't tell.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I've got a question specifically for Sally, because I've seen she changed her fields from chemistry to physics. And I'm planning to do something similar in the sense that I'm going to be moving from a very wet lab background in biomedical research into systems biology and bioinformatics for my PhD. So how would you sort of tell your supervisors or just even the interview? I mean, how would you prepare for it? Because you actually don't know much about that subject or the techniques or the theory.
Oh man. Oh wow. I know from my jump was that the link for me between chemistry and physics was the coding. So I'm not sure for bioinformatics how much coding you're going to be able to do, but how I think I can sell myself is that I bring a different perspective. I'm bringing a chemical perspective, but it does often feel like I'm speaking Cantonese and they're speaking Mandarin. But I think that, you know, in a way you have an edge because you're bringing a different perspective. Does that help? That's not very specific, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. Actually, I was thinking along the similar lines because most of the bioinformatics and systems biology people are engineers, so they're not actual biologists. But yeah, that might be my USP, definitely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Charlie's phone has joined again.
Hi. Sarah, you were saying before, like before applying for a PhD or while applying for it, we should get in touch with the research group. How would you recommend to do that?
Email them, just out of the blue.
Yeah, but how like sometimes I find difficult to find the names of the people working with that particular professor, so I don't know.
You could ask the professor if they'll let you speak to one of their PhD students. A lot of them will suggest that anyway. If they get really angry at the prospect, that probably tells you something about the relationship they have with their PhD students.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other last questions? What's the best way to tackle the initial email to a potential supervisor? I have actually spent today writing a lot of emails to people about fellowship. So I'm going to copy and paste what I wrote to these people in the chat. Other people might have other perspectives they want to contribute.
I would just say, be aware that especially kind of this time of year when lots of people are thinking about applications. I know my PI can get 10, 20 emails a day from people who are looking to apply. You really, I think, need to be kind of concise but memorable, and maybe you know, include a CV or something so that they also already know something about you. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. How do you stand out when they're getting 20 emails a day? I don't know. That would be my.
Anyone else? Yep, Sally.
I would second the including your CV. I think academics really like the CV.
Yeah. Any
Nice.
other? Sorry, go for it, Charlie.
I was gonna suggest we stop the questions now. We'll have a 10-minute break before the workshops. So I've sent everybody an email which has, so I've changed the groups around a bit. So we're gonna split group 1. So the people that want to do the mock interviews will have a chance. So there's 4 and 2 in each group. I'll send the link now to the information in case you didn't receive the email. So just simply join the Zoom link that you've been allocated. Hopefully you're happy with, oh, hang on. Everyone. So I've just sent this link now. This is the same one as on that I sent on email. Yeah, hopefully you're happy with the group allocations. Join the Zoom link, it'll be 45 minutes. And then we'll all come back onto this call at the end. Any questions, just let me know, email me, whatever. Anything to add, Ben?
No, just to say, hopefully we will see you all back here. So please don't disappear off. We're happy to sort of do a wrap up at the end. If you get lost, just email Charlie or I or something, like on your way to a meeting room. But hopefully we'll see you all back in 10 minutes. I'm going to pause the recording now. So cool. Let us know. Oh, David's back again.
Yeah, this isn't working.
Goodness. Okay. Sorry about that. Charlie says, do you mind just starting a new room and sending him the link? It may be an issue with the existing Zoom link.
Yeah, I'll just do that.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So we've kind of got a few options for what you guys would like to do here. There's 5 of you. So how many of you were keen on presenting something is probably a good place to start. Deathly silence.
In the form, I said I was, but I got busy with something else and I couldn't get anything ready.
Okay. Anyone else got something they're willing to present?
I have something I could, but it's all kind of very geology specific, so I think it's going to make absolutely no sense to anyone. So I'm not too sure whether it's a good idea.
So why don't you just put up the cover slide and you can show us 1 or 2 of your slides, because you'd probably only get 60 or 90 seconds in an interview of like real attention, and then maybe like 5 minutes more to present. So we normally do it as, the last time we did it was 60 seconds. If you want to put up your slides, then you can have 60 seconds to.
Yeah, they're probably a bit long, but we're just going to go with this. We'll see what happens.
Cool. And Guy's also joining us. He's also.
Oh, it says I'm not allowed to share my screen.
You are now.
Yes, perfect. So is that, can you see something happening?
We can see that.
Cool.
So just one thing that I would say when presenting this, bear in mind, even if you're presenting it to geologists, they might not know what all of this means. So you can show your slides, but just try and talk through exactly as Sally said in your research statement. Why is it important? Why are you doing it? And then what are the key results?
Okay. So, I mean, this is something I did for my undergraduate mapping project. So a mapping project is what geologists call their dissertation for anyone that isn't a geology student, because we make a map as part of it. This was kind of my 3rd year dissertation project. And so we were working with Breeden, which is a kind of aggregate company, and we went to look at a subvolcanic complex, and this was kind of very poorly studied. So there'd only really been one paper on it since the 80s, and where it's located, it's kind of, there are some interesting applications for kind of understanding the tectonics involved in the final collision between Scotland and England. So kind of that final time period where the Iapetus Ocean, which was between Scotland and England, was closing. And so that's kind of why we went and did it. That's why it was important. And kind of our results are probably best shown by looking at these rocks, which again, geology specific, but you can kind of see there's very clearly 2 different types of rocks. So these are both chemically similar. So they're both granodiorites, but what had been found before was that this kind of what's called phenocryst pores, so this one with less of the big crystals was only found in one of the 3 phases of the complex, but instead we found that it was found in all 3 phases throughout the complex. So by finding that this rock was kind of in more places than had been previously found before, we were able to kind of say something about the magma sources, because what had kind of been argued before was that this represent the very earliest magma, and then the magma evolved to this kind of secondary composition. But by finding this in all orientations, we kind of then had to argue that it wasn't early formed, but there was a source of this throughout the evolution, which meant we kind of built some models of this, kind of resulting in an understanding of how the magma system worked in this complex. Is the overview.
Perfect. Okay, I actually think that was a really great presentation. And if you were to do something like that in an interview, I think you could be very happy with it. So sort of key points, there's absolutely nothing fine with saying the words, this is why this is important, right? Ram it home to them. And, you know, these are the conclusions. For some PhD interviews, they'll ask you to make a presentation. Even if they don't, you can do exactly what Hazel's done. Have 2 or 3 figures, print out 5 copies of them, and then put them on the desk in front of each interviewer. I mean, I'm assuming that you're going to have in-person interviews. If you don't, obviously, you could just share your screen. But point out specific things to them to make sure that they're really paying attention. Sally, Guy, any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, my apologies for joining late, and thanks for the link. It was very nice seeing the presentation. I'm absolutely not a geologist. I do like rocks, so I loved the picture of the 2 rocks, one on top of the other. In interviews, what sometimes happens is also that people would start asking you some relatively basic questions to see how well you're into your subject. So one question could be, what's granodiorite, for instance? And I don't know if it's useful to start explaining it, because I'm sure that you know what it is, but it might be good to prepare for that kind of thing, so that you can have a very good explanation of everything that you mention on your slides, or yeah. And then also, I think that I missed a small part in the beginning, the idea why it's so important to determine the magma sources. I'm sure for you that's very, very logical, but it might be good to be able to argue that very well also.
Yeah, so I think, Sally, any thoughts on that?
So my thoughts were is that how I think that they would go about this is they're going to say, you know, that they like the presentation. I think they're going to ask some soft questions first. Why did you pick the project? Why is it important? Then, you know, how do you think you could further this project? And then they're going to start pressing you, like, how are the rocks, if they're chemically similar, like, how are they different? Why, you know, what causes these like larger crystals and smaller crystals? I'm also not a geologist, but I'm just trying to think, you know, what they're going to ask, but they're going to start going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it is also okay. You can say, I call it like hitting them upside the head with that, why this is important. Like, this is why it's important. But also it's okay to say, I don't know, because the interview is also, it's to see your character. You know, are you gonna lie? Are you going to kind of bullshit them about something? But also like to see the edge of your knowledge. How much do you know in any sort of direction? So I think, yeah.
I think that last thing is a very good point also. And if you admit that you don't know something, it can be helpful to really make that clear. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think based on X or Y that the answer might be in that direction, or I would go about this in a certain way to find the answer. That can also be nice to show them that you will be proactive and try to come with solutions more than problems.
Yeah, so I mean, if anyone else wants to go next, you're welcome to do the same. Obviously, none of us are specialists in what Hazel does, but you can see your interview might well be like that. You know, you might have someone who's, say, a physicist interviewing a physicist. But if you do cosmology and they do solid state physics, they're going to be the same level of stupid questions we're asking Hazel. But you can be clever, right? If there's something you want them to ask a question about, leave a kind of exciting thing that's an open thing, but isn't something that you've obviously tried to like not talk about. Give them an opening to ask questions about what you want to know about. There's loads of books you can read on interview psychology and all that, but I would say the main thing is just be confident and clear in what your project's saying. But as Guy said, if you don't know the answer, don't try and lie to them, because that will be very obvious that you're just making it up as you go along. I'm just looking at who else said they'd be up for presenting.
I'm happy to present.
Luke, yeah, do you want to go for that? Have you got any slides or?
Yeah, I've got some very, very rough slides.
Perfect.
Can I share the screen?
Yeah, of course. Yep, go for
it. Sorry, I think I need to give it access to do that.
Oh, you should be allowed to share your screen. Let me just reset that. Okay, try it again.
Sorry, it's going to be a minute. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, as I said, these are just some very, very quick thrown together slides, so they're nothing particularly fancy. I'd like to talk about this is what I'm currently doing for my master's project, which is exoplanet transits of fast rotating stars. So essentially the existence of planets which orbit lower mass GKM stars is quite common. So stars like the sun, smaller in mass, but we know comparatively little about planetary systems around hotter, more massive stars, so A and F type. So this is just a rough depiction of classification. So the sun is a G type. So we know, as I said, a lot about GKM, but not very much about A and B, because not many systems have actually been observed. So larger stars are typically hotter, and they're also faster rotators. Stellar rotation is principally a function of either mass, age, or both. So in an exoplanetary context, very few of these types of stars have been found to host planets. So just to give you a rough idea, we've currently found just over 4,000 exoplanets, but by my very, very rough estimates, there are probably only about 30 of these that are fast rotators, so A and F type stars, which are found to be planet bearing. We learn about these types of exoplanetary systems through a technique known as transit photometry. And this was first used to detect an exoplanet in 1999. And it was actually done using a telescope mounted in a car park, which I thought was quite interesting. So essentially the technique works by measuring the luminosity of the star through time. So when a planet transits across the front of the star, there's a decrease in luminosity, and that's from our view, edge on towards us. Now, with this this geometry and this orientation, it's only possible for around 1 to 2% of orbits to be aligned like this. So we can only see a tiny, tiny fraction of planetary systems because of the alignment. So the periodic dimming is caused by the planet blocking a proportion of the star's light as it passes between the star and the telescope. So from this, we can derive something called transit depth, which is effectively a ratio of planetary star to star radii. To give you a rough idea, if you were looking at this for Jupiter and our sun, that blocks around 1% of the planetary disk, whereas for these much larger stars, a typical transit depth is normally 0.008. So obviously the stars are much, much bigger, even though oftentimes the planets are larger than Jupiter. So from these transits, you can work out the planet's diameter, obviously the period, how often it rotates around the star. And interestingly, we can work out something called the spin-orbit angle, which is essentially how the planet is aligned relative to the spin of the star. And we do this through something called the Roster-McLaughlin technique, which is essentially shown in this diagram. To give you an extreme example, does the planet go around the star's equator or does it go over the poles? So as the star rotates, as you can see on the diagram on the left-hand side, one side of the star comes towards the viewer and is blue shifted, and the other side goes away and that's red shifted. Now, with an exoplanet transiting the star, it will block different quadrants of the photosphere. So essentially the light from the star, and you can infer orbital geometries. And something quite curious jumps out at us when we look at this. Why do planets orbit at an angle close to the star's spin angle in cool stars, but they orbit highly inclined in hot, fast rotating stars? So essentially, cool stars, they go around the equator, but hot stars, they go over the poles. There's a misalignment there. Now, because of centrifugal forces, these fast spinning stars are flatter at the poles and they bulge at the equator. So you can see here. And this produces an effect known as gravity darkening. So the gravity is stronger at the poles, which causes an increase in brightness and temperature, and it's weaker at the equator, so it goes darker, so hence gravity darkening. And this likely plays into something called differential rotation across the stars. So different parts of the star rotate at different speeds, and that depends on the latitude. So whether you're near the equator or whether you're near the poles. Regarding temperature with these hot stars, there's a point at 6,100 Kelvin where the stars start to spin a lot quicker than stars that are cooler. So this rotational discontinuity is thought to come from different internal structures. So essentially, cool stars have thick convective envelopes with radiative cores, and hot stars have radiative interiors with thin convective envelopes and small convective cores. So cooler stars have stronger magnetic fields, and there's something called magnetic braking, which can potentially explain the discontinuity. What we don't really understand is why there's a trend for spin orbit misalignments in fast rotators in contrast to slow stars, basically. And the answer to this could have quite important implications on our understanding of how planets and stellar systems form. So we see this trend across pretty much all of the exoplanets we've observed.
Perfect. Thank you, Luke. Any feedback from Sally or Guy or Izzy? My thoughts were great that you had very simple slides and talked through them. The last thing you want to do is overload people with text. You could add a sort of concluding statement at the bottom just to drive home the point about what's most important as well.
I also thought it was a very nice presentation. I learned things that that are really cool to know. I think. So I think didactically this was great. I'm not sure how interviews will be done in your field, but probably the interviewers would like to hear some hypotheses. So I think you did very well in explaining we know A, B, and C, and then there is a problem. At the end you explained what we don't understand is. And I think it would be good if you could add to that, well, and this is very important because of some reason. And then I propose to solve this or to make part of the solution by working on some hypothesis. Okay. So I'm not sure if this is done in your department this way, but in general, I think that would be good for a DPhil interview.
Okay, brilliant. I think I'm not really there yet. Haven't quite got to the hypothesis yet, so yeah, sort of early stages. But yeah, thank you.
Isabel, do you want to go and then I'll comment because I'm in exoplanets. So
I think the slides were really good and they're like not too crowded, which is nice. I guess my only comment would be it would probably be nice at the end to have like some open questions, like on a slide of like things that you want to know, just as a kind of summary of where you'd envisage the project going. Could be quite nice, as well as a summary of what you've discussed. But apart from that, I think it was a really nice presentation.
Okay, I'm gonna dig in.
Okay.
All right, so I'm in exoplanets. I think for everyone, I think if you're going to show your MPhys project or your fourth year undergrad project, saying who you did the project with, under the direction or supervision of blah, with maybe a postdoc or PhD students, their name blah. So I don't know who you did the project with, but also following on to what Guy said, why are transiting exoplanets around A and F type stars important? So putting that into context, and then following on to Isabel's commentary, like the open questions, and you said you hadn't gotten to the hypothesis. That's called burying the lead in science. It's not like a novel where you're like, ooh, what's it gonna be about? You want to just be like, this is what my project is about. So don't bury the lead. And then as far as the slides go, I'm wondering if you took screenshots from your MPhys document, just because it says figure 4. Traditionally in these sorts of presentations, this is just like a little tiny detail. This is just like nitpicky to maybe like level you up. The number like figure 4, or I saw that like you had pale red dot 2016 on the transit slide, and you had also like cut the top, so you can get the. That's a very popular figure, the transiting one. So you want to make sure it's like pristine, and like if you don't have the year, you can just put like courtesy ESO, but don't put like figure 4. Just put like, you just have to be like, I got this image from like ESO, image courtesy ESO. So they're more looking at your understanding. So just to sort of level you up. So,
yeah, no,
but
it's great. Chucked it together very last minute. So it was a bit of a rushed one, but yeah, that's great. I'll have to
all right.
make sure it's all tidy.
We've got a bit of time now, about 20 minutes. What would you all like to see, in the sense that we can do a mock interview? We can kind of, there's 4 of us, we can imagine it's a panel interviewing one person. We can, we could interview each other. I mean, I think from your guys' point of view, the most useful thing would probably be for us to do a panel interview on one of you, as it were. But that also requires someone to sort of step forward and be willing to do it. And obviously we won't be able to ask any in-depth subject-specific questions for most of the projects, but we can give you the sort of standard interview grilling if you'd like. Anyone? No one going to step forward. So no one has a burning desire to be interviewed? No? Okay. Shall we panel interview one of the 4 of us then? Okay.
A nice alternative.
Sure. Any volunteers? Sally, I feel like you've told us a little bit about your work, so maybe it makes sense for us to do an interview on you. Maybe
okay.
Do you want to do like 3 minutes talking about your work, and then we'll ask you some questions?
Sure.
If that's all right.
All right. Hi, Sally Blumenthal. I'm just going to do this like I did my interview. So I switched PhDs. So I was at the University of Exeter, and I was working on haze in exoplanets and thermal structure. And my background is in chemistry, and I would like to come to Oxford because I would like to do a PhD on chemistry and dynamics together with Ray Pierre Humbert.
Cool. Okay. So what we could do now is, you never really know what you're going to get in an interview. Some of them will be a real grilling, and they'll ask quite aggressive pointed questions. Some of them will be like a really chill chat. So we've got 3 examiners, and I guess one of us can be nice, and one of us can be in the middle, and one of us can be nasty. I quite enjoy being nasty, so I'm going to go for that one. Guy, do you want to be in the middle? And Izzy, you can be the nice one, just on the order you are on my screen.
Sounds fine.
Okay, Guy, do you want to go first and start asking some questions?
Yeah. So in a panel, I would typically admit that I'm not an expert in the field, but of course I do have some questions that I've always wanted to ask about exoplanets. Can you explain why it's important that we study exoplanets?
Sure. Why it's important we study exoplanets. as Luke said, we've discovered about 4,000 plus exoplanets. And we've discovered a large population of actually Earth-like exoplanets and sort of hot Jupiter style exoplanets. And what's great about exoplanets is because there's so many, we can study populations. So we can find out trends about planets, and we can find out about our own system, our own planet, by studying different planets and different systems.
And would there be an impact for the way that we live on Earth, the things that we do here? Can there be an impact of studying those other planets?
Sure. I mean, we have a huge issue for our planet currently is climate change. And I think a lot of climate deniers and things like this have said, you know, that our climate has always been changing. Specifically, my project was on haze. The early Earth, Archean Earth, was covered in a thick orange haze. And that can be seen in the ice record. And basically by studying the different life cycles of these different planets, we can find out about the life cycle of our own planet, how important, you know, greenhouse gases are on other planets. For example, you know, you could find out how long could a planet of a certain gravity and equilibrium temperature, you know, sustain life or habitable temperatures for like how much CO2. So these are, and then, yeah, so this is, I mean, also from just a completely inspirational point of view, I mean, the big question, are we alone? As well as, you know, are we going to have a place to go as humans if we mess up this planet? Even though, I mean, the closest habitable exoplanet is Proxima Centauri b, which is about 4 light years away, which if you took our fastest rocket, we'd get there in about 80,000 years. So that's not really an option. But I mean, thinking about life on other planets, thinking about other planets might give us the onus of taking care of our own planet.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps as a last question in this round, so I heard you argue that it's important to study the life cycle of those exoplanets. Does that mean that you assume that you can sort of reconstruct a life cycle by looking at a group of a few thousand planets, or is there a way of getting some measures that are spaced far enough apart?
Okay, so this is a highly speculative question out of my area of expertise. Aging planets along with stars is a very speculative science, not speculative, but there's a whole subdiscipline of aging stars and aging systems and figuring out how a planet formed, where it formed, how old it is. Generally, the consensus is that you have hot young planets forming close in to their star versus like maybe planets in like a more, I don't know exactly, but this is sort of a larger goal of the field. So this is a part where you can say like, this is sort of out of my area, or this is, you know, highly speculative. So now we're finding sort of the edge of my knowledge.
Thank you.
I kind of built myself a little trap there, so be careful.
All right, Izzy, any questions?
Yeah. So I guess you said that you were initially doing chemistry in, I guess, exoplanets is more in the physics kind of spectrum. What kind of perspective can you give as a chemist rather than a physicist to the problem?
Okay, great. So what sort of perspective can I give as a chemist to physicists? So I also like to repeat the question, 1, to buy myself time, and 2, to make sure that they understand that I understand the question. So for modeling exoplanets, we use a lot of chemical models, and in order to make, every model is going to be wrong, but figuring out what are the key reactions maybe in a model, what are, coming from a more wet chemistry background, I can read the literature and tell you like why I took the reaction rate in a kinetic model over another reaction rate, because I understand the physics of the actual exoplanet system, and then how the experiment is analogous to that system, as well as then just from a theoretical point of view, like maybe like what's more important in an atmosphere chemically than, you know, for example, for like this phosphine detection Venus, we know that this is a very rare chemical, and knowing that like this is a difficult chemical to make in the lab, except under like very high pressure circumstances, that this can be a signature for life, because this is a byproduct in a very theoretical sense of microorganisms. So bringing that kind of sanity check on chemistry.
Yep. And I guess the other question I have is kind of, you said you moved from Exeter on your initial PhD of doing hazes to the project in Oxford. What kind of skills can you bring from the previous project to the project in Oxford to kind of help you do the new PhD?
Sure. So I was working with self-consistent thermal and chemical models for modeling both the thermal structure and the chemical structure of an atmosphere together. From that experience, I learned a bit about Fortran. I learned a bit about thermal structure. However, because those tools are proprietary to Exeter, I will not be bringing any of those tools with me. But what I will be bringing are my skills in coding, my knowledge of chemistry, all the background knowledge, and an ability to build a tool to do rigorous chemistry at Oxford. So sort of saying like, I can't bring any of the stuff with me, but I can like build something new at Oxford. But I'm unwilling to maybe like, you know, steal from Exeter and make the same thing. So I'm going to make something different, but with that chemical insight.
So now we also heard that you're really turning into a physicist if you learn to program in Fortran.
Maybe.
All right, so my turn next.
Okay, here we go.
And yeah, just to be clear, you shouldn't expect your interviewers are going to be horrible to you. But if you have 5-6 interviews, which is quite normal, it's entirely possible you'll end up with one person who's just a bit of an idiot. So you've got to be prepared, and don't let, some of them will do it deliberately just to see how you respond, which I wouldn't do, but you have to be prepared to do that. So let's think. All right, Sally, so you've told us that you're going to come from a chemist background to do a project that's very coding heavy and very mathematical heavy. It's not clear from your applications that you have the skills to do this project, and why would we take you over someone who's clearly got a well-defined mathematical and physical background and really understands exoplanet science? So, you know, I think you need to convince me that you actually have what it takes to undertake this project academically, because at the moment, I'm not convinced of that from your application.
All right. Well, I have been working in the field for 6 to 7 years now. So I do think that I have the background. I'm providing a nice bridge between physics and chemistry. So in a way, I've learned a lot of physics along the way. I have extensive background in mathematics, because I did a minor in mathematics in my undergraduate, and speak code in several languages. So any additional questions? I think that I bring a fresh perspective to physics, and I think that is very needed in the field at the moment.
Right, okay. So that's actually probably a very good way to kind of disarm the question, is don't make it about what you don't know, play to your strengths and say what you're going to bring to the project. But they might also try and really ask something that it's not reasonable for you to know, or just to see how far you're willing to go. So you'd be like, all right, Sally, well, you know, if you honestly think that you've got what it takes to do this project, what do you see to the main technical hurdles as that you're going to come up against in this project, and how would you overcome them? Because if you don't have a route to overcoming them, there's not really much point in starting, is there?
So I see the main hurdles of this project is the actual dynamics equations of the project. And what I'm hoping to do is to take some classes in order to fill in some of my knowledge on the dynamical system. So now I'm starting to struggle.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all right, right? Like you can say that. What would be an appropriate answer is not only just to say what you're going to do, but how you would approach tackling the problem, right? I think it'd be quite fair to say, I am going to have this procedure in place for, Googling it is normally a good start. Then I'll ask my supervisor. Then I know of this person or this person who in the field might be able to help me. So one last one. Okay, Sally, well, teamwork is very important in our discipline, and you haven't actually mentioned anything that shows that you're capable of working with anyone other than yourself. So what can you do to convince me that you're going to be a good fit for our research group and are going to be able to contribute not just to your own project, but the other projects that we're working on?
Right. So I've consulted on many different projects along the way, and I already have several co-authored papers. So I'm hoping, to be some sort of consulting chemist on other projects and keep bringing that fresh perspective to other people's research. Yeah.
Okay, that's probably a pretty good answer. We've got about 4 minutes left before people start joining. So rather than doing sort of more questioning, thank you, Sally, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask us just about what you've seen, about how you might target an answer to a specific question or anything like that?
I've got a question about
Sure.
When you're being asked about the importance of the research you're doing. My specialization would be pure abstract maths, which has very little real world application. Yeah, it's kind of, for me, it is more of an interest thing than this is going to change the world thing. I just don't really know how I would tackle, like, why is this important?
Yeah.
I think I have an answer to
Yeah,
this.
go for it, Sally.
So first of all, your panel is going to be other people in pure maths who are going to understand this, but they probably will still ask you this question. I think it's important to demonstrate that you understand that there's no concrete application, but the importance is exploring fundamental theory, especially in math, because we don't know how that will be applied, and that you can play to your strength in that, I'm just interested, I'm really interested in this, and I really like it. That, that's really good fuel for discovery and for, just general research, just having that sort of hungry passion to explore around.
I would agree with that. I think it's two very important points. One is that you show that you have a passion for your subject, which is very important for supervisors. And the other is that you can always probably find some way in which your research will have impact, and basic science or mathematics is extremely important. And probably if you have a very good question, a tough problem, then that might have an impact on other mathematical problems. So it doesn't have to be really very specific real life applications, but if you can show how it interacts with other pieces of mathematics or science, the interviewers will probably like that.
Yeah, I think both what Guy and Sally said was key. The only thing I wouldn't do is don't go into the interview and say it has no real life applications and definitely never will, because if you say that, they probably shouldn't give you a PhD place. It's fine to say that you don't know what difference this is going to make today. But I think a little bit of prep here would help you, because there are lots of bits of pure and abstract maths that never seemed like they were going to do anything useful 100 years ago or 150 years ago, but today are obviously very crucial to what we do.
Yeah, like
I think finding those examples, like this was something that was found and then, years later it was applied, I think that would be very good for preparation. But I think they're going to be trying to figure out, how like in touch are you with knowing that like pure maths doesn't have this like sort of doesn't have like an application always at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so everyone's back here now. I thought it would just be useful to do a little bit of a wrap up and any final thoughts. Charlie, anything that you want to say?
First thing, sorry.
Yeah, go for it. You're muted on there now. Oh, now we can't hear you at all. You're muted on your phone too.
Okay, yes.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, firstly, hopefully that went okay. I know there was some technical difficulties, mainly my fault. But hopefully, yeah, things worked for you. You got something out of it. And if you do want to continue, I think, as I'm happy, as long as our other volunteers are happy, we can definitely just continue this after we kind of officially wrap up. Also, I will send to you in a few days' time just a big document with everything for the day, so the slides, useful contacts, and also another, I did say this at the start, but people that maybe didn't find someone, that's too related to their subject, you can send me an email and I can hopefully kind of link you up with someone who does do your subject. Yes, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. Any of the other volunteers, Sally, Guy, Sarah, Linda, Izzy, want to chip in with anything?
I must say I enjoyed this very much. It's totally out of my field, but really very interesting. So I want to wish the candidates the best of luck in the interviews.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, we all did this because we're happy to help. So if you do want to get in touch with us, just do. I don't think we can promise to read, 50 applications each, but if you have something you want to ask about or how to phrase an email, probably we can provide you with some guidance on that. I guess, you're all thinking about PhD applications for next academic year, but hopefully some of you will think about applying to Teddy Hall and certainly to Oxford as well. So it would be great to see some of you around. Obviously, we try and sell this event to the college and say it's something they should support too. So the best way of us showing that this is working is for you to all go and put down that you're going to come to Teddy Hall. But just bear in mind what we said about the different benefits of different colleges, different universities, programs, and so on when you're thinking about where to apply. That's about all I had to say. Just to say a massive thank you to everyone who organised, especially Sally and Charlie for putting together the schedule and making everything run so well, and to Shreen for doing the poster. I don't have much else to say, but if anyone else has any final closing questions or comments, if not, I think the other group, if you want to carry on your sort of mock interview, that's fine. I think our group, we were probably about done, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions?
No.
I have one remark.
Okay.
Just personally, I didn't think that I was going to have any chance getting into Oxford. And yeah, when the prospect was presented to me to apply, I thought there's no way, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So I would say there's nothing like, ground yourself, find your confidence. Like there's no reason they shouldn't not pick you. And I think it's just sort of an intersection of, if you don't get picked, it's also, when I was at Exeter, I saw some very talented, very smart PhD students who also applied to Oxford. And I thought, how did they not get in? And like, how did I get in? So I would say it is sort of like a bit of luck, and that if you don't get in, don't let that knock your confidence. Like you can still like do great work, at any university. And if you do get in, like, it's not the end all be all. So, but yeah, there's no reason why they shouldn't pick you. And that sometimes it just, it can be small things that get you in or don't get you in.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you really, really love your subject, really passionate for it, I think this is the most important ingredient, because, as it's been mentioned a few times, it's stressful. There's lots of, highs and lows, and what gets you through is that kind of baseline love and, yeah, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. and realizing it's worth it. But yeah, this is why they want people that really care, because you need to care to get through it, I think.
All right, should we leave it there then?
Sure. So maybe we should use this. So anyone that still wants to continue the mock interview workshops, I guess we can arrange on this chat, leave a link. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. I hope it's been useful. Any more questions? Yeah, that we'll have contacts and things in this document I'll send out. Yeah, and best of luck with your applications and yeah, whatever you decide to do.